you remember your high school graduation? Remember that? Anybody remember what the person at high school graduation said? Yeah. Any idea what they talked about? No, nobody ever listens to that. But I guarantee you that whoever that was speaking at your graduation or your college graduation, they were saying things about your future. They were preparing you for the future, getting you to dream about your future, about a bigger day that's in front of you, about where you're going to go and what's going to happen and the possibilities that are there. And I think about this last week. We celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. We think about his dream and how he pushed people forward. And the dream that he had, and the dream that a lot of people in America, the dream that a lot of people are buying into, are very different things. A lot of times there are dreams that are something that for us to aspire to, that inspire us, that make us want something greater and more significant. Other times we settle for less than the ideal dream, and we buy into this dream that the world sells us, that it really is all about pleasure. It's all about stuff. It's all about making more, and it's all about getting more things. And what happens is we begin to equate success with wealth, and we just live in that kind of culture that just equates success with wealth, success with money, and having more and more stuff. Now, if you know me at all, you know I'm a big rapper from way back when, and so I want to quote from my favorite rapper, 50 Cent, or 50 Cent. 50 Cent, here's what he said. Listen to the message that he gives out to people in his, I was going to call them songs, not really songs, but anyway, what he says the dream is to get rich or to die trying. Really? Really, Fitty? Really, Fitty? The dream is to get rich or to die trying. He goes on, he says, son, if you're really going to make it in life, if you're really going to be successful, you got to get as much money as you can, man. A man will be judged by the size of his wallet. That's the message that goes out to so many people, that wealth is what it's really all about. But I want to tell you, and as you figure this out, is that wealth, there are a lot of things that wealth cannot afford. Wealth cannot afford respect from your kids. Wealth cannot afford you health. Wealth cannot give you peace. Wealth cannot give you family. Wealth cannot give you integrity. Wealth cannot automatically give you relationships. I mean, you name it, there are all kinds of things that chasing after wealth is just exhausting, and it often leads at a dead end. I'm wise enough to know that while I may not be infatuated with money like a lot of people are, I too am chasing after something. There are things that I chase after as well, and you may be in that same boat. You may not be somebody that is just, it's all about wealth, it's all about money, it's all about getting more stuff, but yet I would challenge you to think inside of yourself and look inside yourself and realize that there is something still that you're chasing after. You have a dream, I have a dream, that chase is a dream it's a chase for meaning. We want our lives to count. We want to have some kind of meaning and significance in our life. None of us want to just be a blip on the radar screen and have made no contribution on our time here on earth. And I know that's a big part of my dream. It's probably part of your dream as well for a lot of people, that you want your life to count. You don't want your life to be wasted. You don't want to just get to the end and be like, well, what did I really do with my life? You want some significance in your life. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today as we finish out this series, talking about what we can do to grow forward. And then I want to pick up on it a little bit next week. We're going to change gears a little bit next week, but I want to talk about significance and a longer picture next week as well. But for today, as we finish up this series talking about growing forward, I want to talk about a pathway that will grow you and lead you toward significance. Now, when Jesus walked on the earth, when God came to earth and walked on this earth among men, he taught us that significance does not come through wealth. It isn't just about stuff. He says, though, that you can, in fact, experience significance. And if you want to be great, you can be great. And he says, I want you to be great. I want you to have a life of greatness. If you want meaning, he says, I want you to have meaning. He said, I created you so that you could have not just life, but part of that life is that I created you that you would have meaning. But he says that it comes in a radical package. Success, meaning, significance, worth, value comes in not the way that we would often think that it would come. It comes in a radical package. Jesus says, if you want to be great, if you want meaning in your life, if you want significance, you can have it but it comes in a radical way. And here's where it comes. It's in the word serve. That's the recipe for greatness, is serving. The route to significance is paved with service. That's how we get to a life of significance. So here's what I want to do, is I want to give you, just take you on a quick tour through the life of Jesus. Just real fast, I want to follow him around for just a little bit of his journey. And I want to build a case for where we get this out of the Bible, where we get this idea that success and significance really comes through serving, so that you can better understand what the Bible has to say about it. It's very obvious that this was the life message of Jesus. It was the teaching of Jesus. So when we start to follow Jesus around, first of all, we see that Jesus was somebody that served. Isn't that, when you think about Jesus, you just think, I was somebody that served. So you follow him around and you see that he was always stopping. He was always helping people. He was always healing them. He was always putting other people's agenda above his own. He may have had a plan for the day, and he comes across somebody and he says, oh, the agenda just got changed. And he would take care of that person. He would meet with them. He would serve them. He would do, he would say, what can I do to help you or serve you? Jesus always served. Here's a second stop as we follow Jesus around. We see that not only did he do it, but he taught it all the time. It was a big part of his dialogue with his disciples. There's a famous passage in Mark chapter 9 when all his disciples were gathered together and they were all arguing. And he pulls them all together, and you can just kind of hear his words. And it says, on the way the disciples argue about who was going to be the greatest, and Jesus sat down and he calls them all around and he says, hey, guys, listen. If any of you wants to be the greatest, you have to become the least. You have to become the servant of all. You can just imagine the radical shift of thinking that must have been for his disciples. They're thinking, well, what can I do to get into a place of prominence? What can I do to get next to Jesus? What can I do to be on the same level and get that kind of recognition and that kind of notoriety? And Jesus said, well, you guys have it all upside down. If you want to be the greatest, you have to learn how to become the least. You have to learn how to be the servant. If you want to be a leader, you have to learn how to become a follower. So his closest disciples are having this almost like this childlike argument. And if they were driving around in the Jerusalem in a station wagon, you can just kind of see Jesus kind of reaching back like, you guys settle down back there, you know? And they're arguing, I'm the greatest. I want to be the greatest. I want to sit with Jesus. I want to be in the front seat. I want to be by him. And that type of thing going on, you've heard that kind of fighting and arguing going on. He just sits them down and he ties greatness to this idea of serving. He attaches serving to this idea of prominence, this idea of leadership, this idea of notoriety, this idea of significance. It was stunning 2,000 years ago when Jesus was talking about it. It's stunning today when you think about that, about how Jesus would say the same thing to us today. If you want to be significant, don't just figure out how you can claw your way to the top. Figure out how you can serve and become the least. So he served, he taught people how to serve. The third thing that Jesus did is he told stories. He told parables that illustrated the importance of serving. You don't even have to know anything about the church. You don't have to know anything about God to know the story of the Good Samaritan. There's all kinds of people that know the story of the Good Samaritan. It's taught all around the world in all different contexts. In Luke chapter 10, though, it almost starts out like a joke. Like you're in a bar and it's like, hey, there's a priest, there's a Jew, and there's a despised Samaritan, and they walk down the road, like you're waiting for the punchline. In Luke chapter 10 it says a despised Samaritan. Last week we talked about the woman at the well and how culturally the Jews despised the Samaritans. And so here's another Samaritan. This despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw this man, you don't know the story, the man had been beaten up, he had been robbed, the guy was laying there, and this Samaritan comes along and he feels compassion for the man, and he goes over to him. The Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine, and he bandaged him up, and then he put the man on his own donkey, and he took him to an inn where he took care of him. And then Jesus goes on and he says, using that story, he says, what was it that made the man good? What made the man good was that he saw a need and he met that need. He addressed that need. And so Jesus takes that story And he says, you go and do likewise. Do that same thing. So he told stories that taught about serving. That's serving. The fourth thing that he did, now this is big, is that Jesus stated that his very reason for existence, his very purpose, the foundation of what he was all about serving. It was really his primary existence. It doesn't get any clearer than what we're about to read here. Mark chapter 10. Listen to this. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus said, look, even I, oh, by the way, I'm God. Even I did not come to be served, but I came to serve. I came to roll up my sleeves, put the servant's towel over my arm, get down on the ground level where people are hurting, where people are needy, and do whatever it takes to serve them. That's what I came to do. That's my very existence. That's my purpose. Let's not make any mistake, Jesus was saying. This is why I'm here. I came to serve. And then his final example is we follow Jesus around and we see him and we watch him and we listen to him. His final example with his very life modeled service. You go into the final hours of Jesus' life. You go into the moments where he's hanging on the cross. And even right before that, he knows he's about to be crucified. He knows what lies in front of him. And he pulls all of his buddies together once again. He pulls his closest friends together, and they have one final meal together. And here's what Jesus said. It says, Jesus knew the hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father, and he now showed the disciples the full extent of his love. So he got up from the table where they were all reclined and they were all eating. He took off his robe and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And he poured water into a basin. And then he went around to everybody around that table and he began to wash his disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel that he had tied around his waist. And as he went person to person to person to person and got down by their stinky, smelly, dirty, nasty feet and washed it, he said, I'm giving you an example. Do as I have done. Follow in my footsteps. And this is what it means to follow in my footsteps, to be a servant. Now, this idea of washing people's feet is amazing. It was not unusual so much in that culture. It was a common thing to do. It was not unusual for a servant to do. It was not unusual for a slave to do that. Have somebody paid to come in, somebody that was working for the household to come in and wash everybody's feet, because they walked around on their feet all the time, and they didn't have cars like we had. They didn't have paved roads like we had. And so it was dirty and it was messy. And so when you came to somebody's house, it was a common thing for somebody to provide a servant to wash your feet. But it was highly unusual for a teacher, for a respected leader, for a rabbi, for God in the flesh to take on that role. Of all the things to leave for your very last message with your closest friends, he's gathered, he's been teaching them, he's been building into them. The very last thing that he wants to leave them with is that gathering together and what he did for them and how he demonstrated an example of being a servant. You think about that. Feet are just nasty. You just want to wipe somebody else's feet and clean them off. You know, think about today. We've got fragrances and we've got perfumes and odor eaters and all that, and feet still stink, you know. But you rewind the clock 2,000 years, there were no sidewalks, there were no manicured lawns. It was dirt. There were camel droppings all over the road, and it was walking through all of that stuff. And then you get to somebody's house. So when Jesus got up to wash their feet, it was an unbelievable shock. You think, well, why didn't he just brush their hair instead? You know, that would have been simpler. Why not just pull out the chair? Why couldn't Jesus gone around and just put his hand on everybody's shoulder and just be like, I appreciate you, I appreciate you, I appreciate you. No, that's not what he did. That was too easy. That was too distant. That was too simple. That was too surface level. Because when you wash somebody's feet, that's a big deal. For several years, off and on, I volunteered at the kids' elementary school for field day. Field day, they have the big bouncy things and all that. One of the requirements for the bouncy thing is they all take off their shoes and they all have to go climb up there. And if you've ever been close enough to those things, it's just nastiness. It's just it's a whole lot of nasty bouncing around in those bounce castles. And these kids take off their shoes. And oh my goodness sakes, And you think about that, and the thought of me washing those kids' feet, it just kind of makes you throw up a little bit in your mouth. You're like, I can't even believe that. And you say, well, what if I had a bucket? What if I had a sponge? And I brought it out and I said, would anybody here be willing to wash somebody else's feet? I'm guessing that would not be likely. Not many people would say, oh yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, go ahead and take your nasty foot off that's been sitting in there all morning and walking around. And yeah, let me go ahead and take your sock off and let me get up close and personal with you that way. But think about what Jesus did. The last message that he delivers, he says, guys, I'm leaving. I'm getting ready to leave. I'm not going to be around you like this in this kind of relationship anymore. And so the last message that I want you to hear from me, the last thing that I want to leave you with is you've been with me for 3 years. You've seen everything. And I want to send you home with an object lesson. I don't want you to ever forget this. And I want you to do the same thing now and forever. And then he drove the point home even deeper when he later hangs on the cross. And he allows himself to be put up on the cross to pay for the sins of all of humanity, to pay for your sins and pay for my sins. See, for Jesus, serving wasn't just a good idea. It wasn't just something like, hey, that'd be kind of cool if we became known as people that were serving. It was the main idea. This is what he came to do. And as you study Jesus' life, you can't get away from the fact that it's the primary challenge for those that are going to be followers of Jesus. We make no mistake about it, no bones about what we're trying to do here as a church. We say we are trying to develop an army of people, not just an audience, not just people who will come and sit and listen and stand up and sit down and do the things and then go burp and go home, but to actually develop an army that says we are following in the footsteps of Jesus. And for Jesus, serving was not just a thing, it was the thing. It was the main thing. It is the primary method that God uses to change us into the likeness of Christ. When you serve other people, you're being morphed into his character. You are becoming like Christ. Never more than when you are serving. So let me ask you, why is serving so hard? Well, why is it such a disconnect? Why do we have such a disconnect from that in our lives? Nobody thinks first about serving. We think first about how can I be served? How can other people take care of me? We think about we're the customer's always right, and everywhere we go, we want people to take care of us. So why is it so difficult for us to serve? There's all kinds of reasons. You could probably come up with time, pride, laziness. Let's just call it what it is. It takes humility to serve because you have to put somebody else first. But I think it all gets summarized in the idea that the reason why it's so hard, why serving other people is so difficult, is because we're selfish. We're selfish. Can we just say that? We're selfish. I admit it. I'm selfish. I'm not minorly selfish. I'm in a selfish country like I would win. I am grossly selfish. I'm looking out for myself. Listen, I like me. I like me a lot. I like you too. I just like me a lot more. And I'm selfish. And I tell you why I admit that. I admit that because I'm convinced that until you admit that at the core of who you are, what happens is you're resistant to serve. Because the core of who you are really is selfish. That's just the way we are. You can argue it, you can deny it, you can cover it up, you can sugarcoat it, but at the end of the day, we are selfish. And until you're willing to admit that, I don't think you're open to change. I don't think you're open to what God can do, this whole process of what God does in people and through people when they serve. And I think it starts there. I think it starts with that admission. You got to admit that the reason it's so difficult, if I'm really honest, if I just quit playing games here, is that I'm really selfish. Look, I want the music that I want. I want the environment that I want. I want them to look this way. I want the people that I want. I want things to go the way I want them to go. I want the priorities the way I want. We are selfish people, and we are slow to become servants. Now, when I talk about serving, don't get me wrong. What we're talking about is not some superficial going and baking cookies and serving them to somebody and taking care of them that way and say, oh, I served somebody, check, I did that. No, what I'm talking about is making it a part of your life. That it becomes a part of who you are. It's not just a little something that you do, a little throw-off thing every once in a while. It is a part of who you are. It becomes part of your character. It develops into your lifestyle. It's not just something that you do every once in a while, an hour here, a little bit there. It becomes who you are. That's what we're talking about. That's what Jesus was. It becomes a life of service. Now listen to this. Not out of obligation, but out of a desire. Out of a lifestyle. You just say, this is who I am. This is just what I do. This is the way I'm made. This is the way I'm wired. So my question for us is, how do we get to that point? Well, what do we do? What does that look like for us to get onto that road to significance? And it's a battle. And that's the first thing, actually, is that we have to choose obedience over convenience. Our default mode is to go with the easiest way. Our default mode is to go with something slick and superficial and quick and easy and not have to worry about it. But we have to choose obedience over convenience. If you want to have serving to be part of your character, of who you are, you've got to choose obedience over convenience. A lot of people who are Christ followers, what happens is they want the benefits of being a Christ follower. They want the perks. They want their prayers answered. They want the forgiveness. Oh yeah, I need a new beginning. I want all that. I want the security of eternal life, knowing that when I die, I'm going to spend eternity with heaven. They want all that. They want the power that comes from the power of God that comes with the presence of God in their life. Oh yeah, I want to live that. I want to live on a higher level of power. But a lot of us don't want the cost of those benefits. The cost of those benefits is obedience. We don't like that. We don't like that word. We don't like being told to obey. We don't want anybody telling us what we have to do. In fact, I've been a part of conducting weddings for people. And it's surprising to me the number of people that want to take out that word obey, to love, honor, and obey. As if that is some kind of like, oh, that's a kiss of death. I don't want to obey anybody. You can't tell me to obey. Because we just have this resistance. Why? Because we're selfish inside. Obedience is doing what God wants me to do, even when it's not convenient. That's obedience. I want to show you a great picture of obedience. As we're following Jesus around here, I want you to take another stop with me. One that always challenges me. It's in the New Testament. It's in Matthew chapter 4. It's when Jesus is going out to find his disciples, and he's assembling his team. And he's looking for people that will follow him, people that he will build this transforming kind of relationship in the community with. And in Matthew chapter 4, it says that Jesus called out to them. And he says, come, be my disciples. And he goes to the waterfront there because they were mostly fishermen. So he goes to the waterfront and he says, come and be my disciples. And I love that next phrase. It says, at once they left their nets and they followed him. At once they went with him. That's obedience. And then you follow him a little bit further up the shore, and he comes across two brothers, James and John, and they're mending their nets, and he calls out to them, and he says, come and be my disciples. And the Bible describes immediately they left their nets, and they followed him. They left their boat behind. They left their father behind. They left their business behind. They left all of that behind. They said, it's not about me, it's about him now. If I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and God's presence is in my life, and with his presence comes his power, then what happens is we are faced with this decision all the time. And I don't know about you, but I know in me that the type of Christ follower that I want to be is that I want so much so that when a service opportunity presents itself in front of me, I want so much that my nature would just be to be like Christ, and then just say at once, immediately, I just respond. I don't wait. I don't try to count the cost. I don't try to figure it out. I don't try to find an end around. I don't see if there's somebody else that can meet that need. I want to be the kind of Christ follower that just says, I'm here, I'll do it, I'll take care of it. Now, I'll be honest, I fail a lot at that. I fail. Because a lot of times I choose convenience over obedience. It's just kind of going to reroute my day. I don't really have the time for that. The person's just a drain. I don't want to be a part of that. Think about this. The fishermen probably had convenient lives. They probably had it all figured out. They were probably doing okay. They had this stable family business. It was putting food on the table. Everything was taken care of for them. It was predictable. They knew when they woke up in the morning what they were going to do. They were going to go down to the waterfront. They were going to cast their nets out there. And they were going to fish. And they were going to bait the hook. And they were going to cast it out there. And they knew every day it was going to get up. And they were going to hang out with their friends. And they'd tell their old fisherman jokes. And they'd say, hey, Andrew, why do you fish? And he says, oh, for the halibut. They tell those kinds of jokes. They're like, oh, Andrew, he's so funny. Hey, Andrew, why do you fish? Oh, to cruise my herring. Get it? So they're like, hey, we love this life. We just hang around. We cast nets out there. We tell jokes. We rib each other. We have fun. They knew exactly what they were getting into. And Jesus challenges their convenience, and he says, leave your nets. Follow me. Make me the centerpiece of your life. And you see what they did? They chose to obey. The thing that people misunderstand about God is that God did not just create robots that will automatically, their default mode is just to follow him. I'm going to create this army of people that will just follow me, worship me, love me. He didn't create us that way. God is not in heaven directing every move that you make, pulling little strings and making little things happen here and there. No, he loves us, and he gives us the opportunity to choose. He says, I love you so much, I'm going to give you freedom. I'm going to give you parameters. I'm going to cut the strings. I'm going to cut those ties that way. I'm going to create you, but I'm going to create you to have a free will to choose. And with that freedom, you and I get a chance to choose every day whether we're going to follow him or we're going to not follow him. We get to choose to obey or not obey. And the key word there is choose. We get to choose. And that's where obedience comes in. Obedience, what it does is it requires us to choose God's way. That you and I, every day, we have a choice. And there's things that happen all around us, and we have a choice. And comfort, our security, our stability, our convenience is synonymous. They're all part of the same thing. That comfort, we just want to stay the same. We don't want anybody to push our boundaries. We don't want anybody to move us outside of the box. We just want our little world. It's a little defined world. And we want to do our thing. And we want to go to church. And we want to be good people. We want to have our friends. And we don't want anybody to push out on that. But here's the problem. We're talking about growing forward. That's why we're talking about this. That if you're going to grow forward, you have to be willing to be challenged. You have to be willing to be changed. In fact, if you just stay comfortable, you will not grow. You will not be challenged. But we're challenged and we grow forward when we're pushed, when we're stretched. That's when God molds us. That's when God does something different and new in our lives. And I'll be honest with you, I want to change. I want to be transformed. There are things in my life that just make me crazy, that I still think this way and act this way and talk this way. And I think, I should be past that now. I've been following Christ for a long time. I get frustrated at myself that I'm not further along than I am. And I so badly want to change it. It grieves me, and I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to talk to God. But yet with that tension, I also love convenience. I also love the safety and the security of just doing what I've been doing and not letting anybody push back on me. So you see how convenience is often at odds with obedience. In John 14, Jesus said, if you love me, obey my commandments. If you love me, obey my commandments. Whoa, that's big. He attaches obedience with love for him. That's pretty big. You know, sometimes I hear people describing churches, especially the modern church, and they got nothing but bad stuff to say. And I'm not just talking about people that aren't a part of the church. I'm talking about specifically people that are in churches and they're like, oh, church is so superficial. It's just not very deep. I'm not growing. It's not very deep. And everybody has their definition of what that means. Oh, that church, they're just not very deep. As if you just took 2 verses of the Bible and you stay on those 2 verses and you teach it for 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks and 5 weeks, that's somehow deep. That if you throw in a little bit more, let me give you some ancient Greek and throw out some old languages and give you some context. That if you use personal stories or you use humor as if somehow that doesn't mean that you're being deep. Let me tell you what deep is, what the Bible teaches what deep is. Deep is obedience. Deep is obeying what God says to do. Whether that's one word that's taught, or it's 50 scriptures that are taught, or it's 5 songs that are sung, or 50 songs that are sung, no matter what happens up here, obedience is deep. That's what deep is. Jesus said, if you love me, obey me. That's deep. In Luke 11, Jesus said, even more blessed, even more joyful, even more life-filling are those who hear the word of God and they put it into practice. He's describing obedience. Jesus knew what he was asking when he said, follow me, I want you to come after me. He knew that his invitation wasn't convenient. He knew that there was adjustments that were going to need to be made. He knew that he was asking those fishermen to walk away with everything that was safe and secure and friendly and convenient. He knew that. And by the way, the invitation that he makes here, 2015 to you, it is no different. He knows exactly the invitation that he's making to you is not an invitation of convenience. He knows that if you're here and you're investigating this whole thing about God and you're still trying to figure out where you are in this whole relationship with God and you're wondering and you're just curious and you're seeking, he says, look, my way is not convenient. My way is not easy. God's way, in fact, if you're following him, are at odds with the world's way. They are polar opposite. They are exact competition with each other. God's way says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. The world's way says, you just take revenge. Somebody goes after you, you go after them double. God's way says, turn the other cheek. The world's way says, you make yourself number one. God's way says, no, you put me number one. See, I actually believe that if you were to base your life on the teachings of Jesus, that your life would be ruined. If you follow in the footsteps of Jesus, your life will be ruined. How's that for a marketing campaign? Let's put that on postcards and send it out to the community. Come be a part of what we're doing. It'll ruin your life. That's exactly what God does. My life has been ruined by God. Let me say that. My life has been ruined by God. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't go back and do it any other way. He has ruined me. And I'm eternally grateful. I don't see the world the way I used to see the world. I don't see God the way I used to see God. I don't see myself the way I used to see myself. So if serving is going to be part of my lifestyle, we have to choose obedience over convenience. And then here's the last thing. It's kind of the same, along the same vein, is that we have to look for opportunities to serve. You begin training yourself how to serve. You look for opportunities to serve. Somebody says, well, how do I know where to serve? Here's the answer to that. Everywhere. Anywhere and everywhere. So I just encourage you to start looking. Look for the small things. Look behind the scenes for things. Some of you might be thinking, this is just a way to get people involved in church and sign up for a ministry and do, serve in some way around Lifeline. Well, it's not. What I care about is not filling slots in the ministry. What I care about is your heart. We're trying to bring transformation into our lives. And for those of you that want to be Christ followers and you want transformation in your life, those of you that want to grow forward, you've got to learn how to serve. It's got to become a part of who you are, not just something that you do on an obligatory way every once in a while. It's something that you do to say, I'm off of the sidelines and I'm getting into the game. From the very beginning of Lifeline, we've asked, what kind of community, what kind of impact are we going to have in this community? We projected ahead 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and we said, we want to build such an impact in this community that people would, if we cease to exist, that this community would feel that impact. That they'd say, what did we do before Lifeline got here? It's a group of people, it's an army of people that are serving. And the question is, what is the picture that we're painting to the community? Are we always looking for ways that we can do something for somebody else? Are we looking for ways that people can serve us and do something for us with maybe some strings attached? So I'm not talking about stuff to do out of obligation. I'm talking about stuff that we do out of obedience to God, to say, because of who God is, I want to serve other people. I'm going to make them the priority. That's the equation for significance. And when you serve, nothing in no way is too insignificant. The famous verse that Jesus said in Matthew 10 is that if you give even a cup of cold water in my name to one of the least of my followers, to somebody that nobody else will even notice, nobody will maybe even hear what you do, if you do that, surely you will be rewarded. It's like you've done it to me. I want the name of Lifeline Church to be synonymous with serving, to be synonymous with giving, not taking, to be synonymous with obedience, not convenience. And you have a part in telling that story. And at the bottom of your outline there's a little challenge. A challenge to you to evaluate yourself. And then to make a list. And only you can do this for yourself. You can't have this for anybody else. You can't do it for them. They can't do it for you. But to evaluate, does my lifestyle reveal that I serve from obedience? Does the way I live my life, does it reveal that I serve from obedience? That's your homework this week. You got homework today. I want you to think about that. I want you to write about that. If you are a journaler, if you're a blogger, if you're a writer, I want you to write about that. I want you to think about that. I want you to reflect about that. Does the way I live my life, does my lifestyle reveal a service from obedience? If you need to, maybe you ask somebody else, somebody that's close in your life, and you say, does my life reveal that I serve out of obedience? Do you get that from me? That's the first thing you do, that evaluation. Then the second thing is to begin making a list. You could call this the I could have, woulda, coulda, shoulda, maybe list. The could have list, that you see opportunities. I want you to go back and I want you to reflect. This would be a great thing to do every day before you lay your head down on your pillow, is to think through the day and think, what are those opportunities to serve that I had today that I missed? That I just kept walking? That I blatantly ignored? That I maybe just in reflection think, oh my gosh, there was an opportunity there. It didn't even connect. And I want you to start disciplining yourself along those lines and building that into your life to say, what is it that is going on around me? How can I be more observant? How can I be more world aware about what's going on in the community around you? You know, it may just be when you walk into a room and you see, oh, there's somebody that looks like they're kind of by themselves. And rather than saying, oh, somebody else will probably greet them, somebody else will probably sit by them, that you go up and you sit with them and you greet them and you welcome them and you connect with them. Or you walk out and you see papers on the ground, and you think, oh, somebody else will probably pick that up, and they'll probably get that later on. Maybe somebody's coming back to that. Instead of that, you reach down, and you pick them up, and you collect them, and you take care of them. You go out to lunch, and somebody gets up to get refills, and you think, oh my gosh, I could have done that. I could have been the one that done that. I could have been the one that did the dishes. I could have been the one that cleaned up after everybody else. You begin making a list of all these things and all these places, then you start going through it. And you just say, all right, I'm going to try one a day. I'm going to try to get better at one of these things every single day. And I'm going to serve one day in one little way without recognition. I'm not looking for fanfare. I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I'm not looking for an award. I just want to serve a little bit more. And then you do it 2 times a day. Then you do it 3 times, 4 times a day. And then you're doing it hourly. And then what happens? happens is over time, you begin to develop that. That's just your character. It's just the way your mind works. It's the way your body just reacts to what's going on around you. You just have this servant character, this servant mentality, and look what happens. You become more like Jesus. When you serve, God says, that's what I created you for. That's why I made you. Now you're looking more like me. So I just wonder how many of us think, we could do that. We could just, a little bit at a time, is to chase after things, not that the world is chasing after, but say, what are ways that we can separate ourselves from this world and become servants? Build that into our DNA, that drive for significance, that drive for meaning, and say, that's what I want to do. I want to put it into my DNA. That there's a way to get it. The way to put that in your DNA is to serve. Let's try to do that together this week. Let me pray for us as we close.